You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. I'm going to kick this show off with a big shout out to the Brother Rice High School water polo team, sectional champions. And as you listen to this show, Ed, Dominic Lanuti, my son, 17 years old, and the rest of his teammates will be going for a state championship. I think that's really cool. Like, I keep telling this kid.
That's outstanding. That is outstanding.
I keep telling this kid, like, you may have a banner from your championship team hanging in your high school gym for the rest of time.
Yes.
You know, like, I mean, like that's cool.
Yes, you will be immortalized in your high school for as long as it remains a high school.
Right, exactly. I mean, like, that's just cool stuff. I mean, like, I've always given him a hard time because the Brother Rice band won the state-of-the-art grand championship twice while I was there, and I was the first chair saxophone the second time, and I was on both of them. So there's a banner hanging in the Brother Rice gym of all their state championships, and then there's the band's championships. So I have 2 championships in the gym. So I always laugh about it. I'm like, I got 2 championships in the gym. I know it's for playing saxophone. I know I'm a nerd. Okay? I didn't catch a football and score a big touchdown and win a state championship. It's a band championship. There's 2 of them, but I've always given him a hard time. And now I think he's kind of hyped. Him and his teammates, very hyped. They did a great job last weekend. I forgot to mention them on the last show. By the time you're listening to this, they could be eliminated. They have their quarterfinal. I'm sorry. They have their quarterfinal game on Friday night, semifinals on Saturday morning, and the state championship would be played on Saturday night. But Brother Rice going for a state championship in water polo, and that program has made a massive turnaround underneath Frank Mulcrone there. And the Mulcrone family is a big-time water polo family in the state of Illinois. And over the last couple of years, it's gone from like bottom of the barrel to top. And he's riding the wave. He's very excited. It's really it's cool to watch. It's cool to watch these kids do it. And it's cool to have your kid be a part of it, no matter what happens. It's very cool. And if he wins, I don't know. I'm going to have to buy the kid a steak dinner, and he's going to go walk around for the rest of his life with some kind of ring on his finger, probably. And he'll be one of those old guys sitting in a bar one day going, wow, back when I was a kid, we won championships, as he shows it to somebody. Be one of those guys.
And because of his age and everything, when he is an old man, they'll be like, but Mr. Lanuti, what was water? I don't know what that is.
Oh, yeah, we can't just use water in pools now to play sports. It's so scarce.
Yeah, we sandblast ourselves clean every day.
Anyway, good luck to Brother Rice.
Yes.
And hopefully by the time you hear this, they're still in the tournament. Hey, hopefully they win the whole thing. It'd be really,
hopefully
really cool
they keep continuing riding the wave, as you put it, which is an excellent pun there.
Did I do that? I didn't even notice that. Wow.
You did.
All right, I got puns today. The White Sox have Adrian Hauser. As we kick off this show, brought to you by Cork and Carry at the Park at 33rd and Princeton. Get over there for the award-winning burgers, the ballpark favorites, the amazing menu, the indoor-outdoor seating, although it has been kind of gloomy lately, but it is going to warm up, and you're going to enjoy sitting out there all summer long. It is always a party. Stop by and see them at the corner of 33rd and Princeton. See more at corkandcarry.com. Adrian Hauser is added as the 5th starter because, as anybody could see, the White Sox needed something better than Bryce Wilson.
And they needed somebody competent who is a starting pitcher. Bryce Wilson has been a guy that's never stuck in a rotation before.
Right. Okay. So Hauser is a real starting pitcher. I mean, but he's not a guy who you rely on. I remember there were a few years in there, we've mentioned our fantasy baseball league, that he was a name that you kind of paid attention to, like, hey, he's got a little potential. He's never pitched a lot of innings. He generally averages like about 100 innings a year. Sometimes he moves into the bullpen, but generally he's a starter. The biggest issue he's had is that he puts too many guys on base. He's one of those guys with a career 4.17 earned run average, but a career 1.371 whip. And last year with the Mets, he had a terrible season in terms of putting guys on, in terms of giving up runs. He only pitched 69 and a third innings, and he was available in May at 32 years old. So he's not going to be what you saw in the first start. That's not Adrian. You may want that. That's not what he's going to be. He really is a 5th starter and a fringe starter at that. What's interesting about bringing him in, Ed, at this time, you had to go out and grab a guy off the scrap heap who pitched a very nice first game. But you had to do that because you don't have anything ready to go. You had nothing in the minors. And it struck me as odd when I saw that they added him, because one of the things that listeners and people that know that I do this podcast will bring up to me whenever they want to talk White Sox. I go someplace, they're like, oh, Chris, what do you think about the team? I get asked that all the time. And one of the more normal comments that I hear, Ed, is, but they've got a lot of young pitching. They've got a lot of good arms down there. They're going to be really good one day because they've got a lot of young pitching. But they aren't getting the performances from the guys who might be ready to make the jump that made it like, hey, we need another starter. Let's go down the minor leagues. Instead, they had to go out and get Hauser. You take a look at what the White Sox are doing right now, and I know you were looking at this as well. I mean, the perfect example is Iriarte. He's added in a trade. He's a guy that they wanted to see what he could do. He's got like a 7 earned run average down there, and he's putting 2.5 runners on each inning in Charlotte.
771 with a 2.57 whip.
Yeah, I mean, like, so
That's terrible.
They didn't have something down there to bring up. That's why you had to go get Hauser.
Well, and okay, so like you, I get that, the conversation a lot, how's the team? And everybody points to the pitching. We got good young arms, but they always point to Hagen Smith, Noah Schultz. I've heard Grant Taylor's name, Mason Adams, who's hurt. There's a handful of names that they point to, but it's not like there's an embarrassment of riches where, you've got starters at the minor league level that you're sitting there going, how are we going to accommodate all these guys when they come up?
Well, those guys also aren't ready, right? I mean, Schultz and Smith. Schultz and Smith are down in Birmingham. And Schultz, so far this year, I mean, he's a very talented player, but so far this season, a 4.5 earned run average and a 1.75 whip over 8 starts. And Hagen Smith, this is his first crack at professional ball. He looks really good, but they're not going to bump him up. He's got a 210 earned run average. He's got a 1.21 whip in Birmingham. He's got 7 starts. Not bad, but they're not going to make that jump now with him. They're going to wait on him. They're going to take their time with him. So some of these names, it doesn't matter how they're performing. They're not bringing them up right now.
No, but the point is that when you're talking about this, we're talking about in a year or two when you have a rotation that has, let's say, Shane Smith, who is statistically the White Sox best pitcher right now. Let's say it's I don't know if Davis Martin sticks around, but let's say Jonathan Cannon, who's been pretty adequate, is still around, and then you've got Schultz and Smith and some of these other guys that you can mention, these handful. That's the rotation you're dreaming of. Drew Thorpe coming back. That's the rotation you're dreaming of. But it doesn't mean that the White Sox are flush, right? And that's what we're seeing right now is, like you said, you look at the starters in Charlotte, and it's basically been Owen White, who's a failed prospect from another organization, Justin Dunn, who has not been in the majors in a couple of years, Nick Nastrini, who continues to not perform in spite of what we had seen, the flashes we had seen out of him, and then Iriarte, who has objectively been terrible. And then Chris Rodriguez is down there. He's gotten 5 starts. Tyler Schweitzer's gotten 5 starts, but he has a 7.77 ERA. His whip is better than Iriarte's, but it's 1.68. And the average against these guys is horrendous. A lot of them are, guys are hitting over 300 against them. So you don't have a lot going on. Maybe the one bright spot that's coming is, well, there's Evan McKendry, who they picked up, but he's only pitched 5 innings down there for him. And then Jesse Schultens is still coming back from his elbow injury. So he's a guy that you might see eventually, but he's not ready yet. I mean, he's had 2 appearances since he went down with Tommy John.
I was just looking at him, actually. Jesse Schultens has had 2 starts. He's pitched 7 1/3 innings. He's got a 1.09 whip over those 2 starts, 2.45 ERA. He wasn't going to be ready yet, though. And that's the thing. He wasn't going to be ready yet. He's also a guy that started 11 games in the majors already in his life and hasn't done anything that was world-beating. So they weren't going to rush him up and say, okay, get up here. We're ready to get you into the rotation. I think he eventually gets into the rotation. That's the thing. I think it's Adrian Hauser, and if Schultens continues to pitch the way that he has pitched, at least in these first couple of games, and he starts, throwing the ball well, he could move up. He could eventually maybe slide into that 5 spot. But I don't think you're going to get Smith this year because it just doesn't seem like when you hear stuff coming through the propaganda machine, They seem to try to caution you about the fact they don't want to overdo the innings on Smith. They don't want to overdo the innings on Schultz. They have like a long-term plan for them, and it's almost like, yeah, there's no way I don't get the feeling that there's a plan to get them to the majors this year. In fact, I was talking with somebody the other day who was asking me, well, what do you think about the team and how do you see it going for them? And my take on it, my very quick summary that I gave was, well, I think you got some nice young talent. I like this Mydroth. I like Caro. I think you got a lot of catching talent. I think Teal's going to eventually get up here. They're going to have to figure out where they're going to put him. They're finding some players that get on base a lot. I really like that. There seems to be a new way of approaching the plate. They may have fixed Miguel Vargas. If they did that, that's incredible. That's a big deal. They got to get over the Andrew Vaughn thing and move on from this guy. And then when I look at the pitching, I sit there and I say, look, they got a lot of young talent. But until Smith gets here and Schultz gets here and Thorpe recovers from his injury, and that's one of those ones where it's surgery, recovery. I mean, you probably don't see him even cracking the major leagues until halfway through next year.
Oh, yeah. He's you can pretty much forget Drew Thorpe exists for as long as you can not rely on Smith or Schultz.
So my take that I tell people, as much as I don't like it, as much as it flies in the face of what the chairman of the board said when he hired Chris Getz, I brought in Chris Getz so that there wouldn't be a long time before we were back being competitive. I tell people I don't think that they're going to start even signing free agents and trying to be competitive until 2027. Sox in the Basement listeners, for exterior windows, doors, patio doors, storm doors, look no further than Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest. They are not barging into your house and pressuring you into buying something. You take your time, you go to their showroom, you see everything right there in real life, full color, no pictures in a book, an owner in the showroom, one on site for the install, and all of their own installers. They don't farm out the work. They've been doing it that way for over 40 years in Oak Forest since 1985. Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest uses all major brands and they're custom made. No stock items for a perfect fit. Check them out now, this weekend, a half block east of 159th and Ridgeland at 6280 159th Street. See more at windowdooroakforest.com. I wanted them to sign free agents and stack professional hitters and professional pitchers around the young guys, because I think that when you put too much pressure on youth that is coming up to the major leagues, where they have to feel like they're leading the team. You know, I mean, like your best players right now on this team, several of them are guys that have just gotten here. And it'd be nice if they had more support around them. And so I want them to go out and add players. I think they should do a better job of filling in the gaps next year in 26. But this is a non-competitive team until 2027, and that's if everything works out. That's if Hagen Smith continues to develop and gets better, and they get him to Charlotte, and they're like, okay, or they might skip Charlotte. I mean, we've seen that before, where they just do Birmingham, and they say, well, we're not going to ruin a pitcher by sending him to that bandbox. But the same thing with Schultz, and you're waiting for Drew Thorpe to get better, and you're waiting to see if you develop any other pitching, because I don't think this is the team that goes out and spends a lot of money on pitching. The plan is to develop their pitching and find their 5 starters. And what's nice is, and I described this as well. This is a recent conversation I had with somebody who's a casual White Sox fan. I said, what do you think about the arms? And what I basically say is, well, Smith and Schultz and Drew Thorpe, those are the guys that are your 1, 2, 3 if everything works out in your rotation. Those are your 1,
right.
2, 3. All right. Because Davis Martin is a great 4 or 5. Jonathan Cannon's a great 4 or 5. That's what he is. Those guys are your 1, 2, 3s. You have this incredible season so far that Shane Smith is having. If this is real, wow, did you get lucky? Because he's the best pitcher on your staff. He's got 10 starts. He's got a 2.36 earned run average. He's only 1-3, but that's not because of him. It's because he's on a terrible team. He's putting guys on base at 1.11 whip. Opponents hitting 207 against him. You know, he's struck out 49 and only issued 18 free passes. He's pitching well. But again, he's not an ace. He's your current ace. But if this team gets good, you'd like to see him slot in there in the 4 spot. That's because you're waiting for that big talent to get here, and it's just not going to be here for a little while.
Well, and injuries happen too, as we found out with Drew Thorpe. Injuries happen. We're finding that out with Mason Adams. And you're right. They do have a plan. You know, they're converting Grant Taylor, who was having some success as a starter. They're converting him into a reliever.
Which is weird.
which is weird, but there might be reasons for it in terms of managing his workload, in terms of, having him maybe ready to get a taste of the majors early because they think he's that advanced. There's possibilities there, and I don't want to read minds, but one of the things that as we're talking, I'm reminded of again is Rick Hahn made the same mistake, and Chris Getz might be making the same mistake, and it may just be coming from Jerry because he doesn't understand how a rebuild works. The idea behind a rebuild is that you have options in the minor leagues that can come up and support and supplant major league players. Okay, not that you continually suck until a big wave of 26 men come up who are so good that they cannot be denied. Their talent cannot be denied. The Orioles are finding out right now, as they just fired their manager, that it's not necessarily having the most toys and having the best prospects, because when they come up, if there's nothing to keep that team together and teach them how to win, and no one really there to help guide them, you can have all these prospects come up at the same time, but they may not perform and they may not understand how to put it all together. And what we're seeing with the White Sox too is right now you've got, like you said, Chase Mydroth is establishing himself as a very legitimate major league middle infielder. I don't know if he'll stay at short or if he'll go to second eventually. He's establishing himself as a major league leadoff hitter. That is the perfect spot for him. He's thriving in the position, but 2 through 9 is a hodgepodge, and Edgar Caro's been a little down lately, and Luis Robert Jr. by his own admission isn't even trade bait at this point because he's playing so poorly, and you have nothing behind them. And if they had put together at least a replacement level roster, okay, a roster that you look at from the pitching staff standpoint, from a lineup standpoint, and say, these guys maybe know better than 500. Then what happens is when Chase Mydroth comes up and claims one of those spots from some replacement level vet that you can get rid of, oh my God, we got a star. Okay.
Yeah.
And now these guys are hitting behind him. When Smith and Schultz eventually get here and they supplant, the Adrian Hausers of the world that are sitting in your rotation, you sit there and you go, we went from a rotation that's competent to one that can actually win us ball games, and that is electric. Okay. It's backwards to sit there and think that all these guys are going to come up at once. And so when you see Adrian Hauser brought in, it's because things aren't going well on the farm, as things don't always go. And that was the problem with the first rebuild. And that's where Rick Hahn screwed up. It was he started rushing guys. That's why we're stuck with Andrew Vaughn, because Andrew Vaughn was never given a chance to develop in the minors, and he came up and he is not the hitter that we were promised, but he had to be up by a certain date because that's when it made sense from a timeline standpoint to move on from Jose Abreu, to install him in first base. And the same mistakes are going to be made over and over again if you rush these pitchers. So I don't really care if they finish out the season with Shane Smith. Let's find out if he's real. Jonathan Cannon, let's find out if he's real. And then if you have 3 Adrian Hausers behind him, whatever their various names are, but 3 Adrian Hausers behind them, cool. Because when one of these other guys is ready, come up, jettison them, let this guy cook, and see if he can join Cannon and Smith. Right? That's the way you do it.
And you make a really good point there. I mean, the idea that you're just going to develop down the minors, guys are going to come up, they're going to all work out, everybody's going to stay healthy. It doesn't work. And even if it does work, look at some of these teams that have done rebuilds over the years. And if they don't go out and get the big free agents, I mean, look at the Pittsburgh Pirates. That's what my big fear is. I don't want to be them. That team did the whole tear down rebuild. They did the whole thing where they kept all their players down. They developed. They didn't really fill in around. They wouldn't go out and spend any money. Bob Nutting's cheaper than Jerry Reinsdorf. And their prospects have made it to the majors. Not all of them. For some reason, they're still keeping Bubba Chandler down in the minor leagues. Like, oh, it's a lost season, so let's not have this guy make it to the majors yet, because it's all about control. But they're 17-33 out of the gate in a season that a couple years ago, Pirates fans would have told you, well, that will be competitive that year because all these guys are going to get here. But not everybody develops the way you want them to develop. Brian Hayes had this great season, I remember, back in 2020 in the shortened season. And like, oh, this is amazing. He's going to be a big home run hitter. He's going to do all these things. He's not that, right? O'Neal Cruz, I don't think, is even playing shortstop anymore. He was
Nope,
going to
he's
be
an
their
outfielder.
shortstop, right? He's an outfielder now. You know, development's not linear, and it doesn't always work out the way that you want to work it out. The idea of trying to tell a fan base that you have to put up with bad seasons because, trust us, eventually it will get good when all of these prospects that we're telling you about are good. That's not a sellable thing anymore. You might have been able to sell that 10 years ago when people were fooled by what the Astros and the Cubs did. But the Astros and the Cubs spent money in the end as well. And they also were very fortunate in a lot of their development. But for every one of them, you get 3 teams like the Pirates, or you get a team like the Orioles right now at the bottom of their division. These rebuilds, these ideas of like, okay, we're just going to hoard prospects. We're going to work them off in the minors. Our major league Twitter account and social media accounts are all going to put out these amazing moments down in the minor leagues. Just watch out, because one day these guys are all going to get here. And then go look at what the White Sox prospect list looked like on the MLB Top 100 list back in 2018, 2019. Remember, they had like something like 10 guys on that list. And a lot of them didn't make it. A lot of them didn't make it. A lot of them didn't pan out. I mean, remember all the great video and stuff like that? It doesn't work that way. And so it goes back to the thing that we're talking about right now. There is talent down in the minor leagues. It's not enough. And if you really want your talent from the minor leagues to have its best chance in the major leagues, you need to surround it with competent, at least replacement level baseball at the other positions. And you don't have that right now in the White Sox order. I mean, first of all, your bullpen's terrible. You have
bullpen has gotten bad.
You have some competent pitching. I mean, you really do. I mean, it's surprising, but you have 3 competent pitchers right now in Martin, Cannon, and Smith. They're competent pitchers. You take a look at their stats. These guys are major league starters. You don't have a top end guy, fine, but they're major league starters. You got some competent starting pitching, and you've got some hitters that are working out. But as we talked about last week, I was amazed by the fact that we had 2 players with OPSs over 700 on this team. And we still only have 2 players with OPSs over 700 on this team. Generally, the average OPS, that is your slugging and your on-base percentage added together, which is a great indicator. It's a very quick look. I mean, everybody likes different stats when they're looking at hitters. I like it because it's a very simple way to look at things. Does the guy get on base, get extra base hits? How often does he do it? Generally, the average OPS is about 720. I've been gracious enough to say I just want to see how many we can get over 700. Miguel Vargas is at 711 right now. Chase Meidort's at 757. I'm not counting Corey Lee because it's only after 15 games. And I'm not counting Mike Tauchman because it's only, 15 at bats. And Mike Tauchman's had 10. So their OPSs are higher than 700. But let's get a better sample size in 3 games and 9 games between those 2 guys.
Yeah, and the next closest is Benintendi, who's at 698, which isn't enough, and Omar Narvaez, who's not here. Lenyn Sosa is the only guy that seems to be on the climb with that.
He's been climbing a little bit. He's been playing well.
Yeah, and so you have the makings of stuff, but when we're talking about guys that you can count on 2 hands, okay, you don't even need to take your shoes off to count the number of guys that are contributors that you can say going forward. I think this guy is something, or he has a chance to be something. That's not a 26-man roster. And you need, 24 out of the 26 players to be at least replacement level, right? I mean, you can maybe get away with a backup catcher who can't hit worth a darn, but, is great behind the plate. You can maybe get away with a utility guy who is light hitting, but can play a bunch of positions and play them really well. Or maybe you're carrying one guy in the bullpen who's kind of janky, but he's a rubber arm. He can go out whenever you want him. I mean, there's a lot of things that need to go into this team still that just aren't there. And so when we're getting excited because Adrian Hauser puts together a good start, it's also kind of damning because you sit there and you go, yeah, but why wasn't there I guess Martin Perez was the Adrian Hauser going into the season, but why isn't there more of that? Why isn't Charlotte have one guy that you're sitting there going, yeah, this guy's been around. He really has been around and he can kind of do it. He's just not good enough to be on a major league team right now. Why isn't that guy sitting there? If you're picking guys up off the scrap heap, why aren't you finding the guys that have some experience that when they come up, they can sit there and go, look, I'm just happy to be here. I'm happy to contribute and I can pass on what went wrong with me over the past 6 years of my career to Jonathan Cannon so he doesn't do the same thing, right?
I'm looking at a list of MLB players. I'm just kind of scrolling through right now, trying to find names that like the White Sox could have had on their team this year for very little money, right? I came upon one so quickly, and I just laughed at the OPS. I laughed at it. I was like, well, you made the wrong choice there, Getsy. Gavin Sheets. Gavin Sheets has 142 at bats right now this year. He's hitting 275 for San Diego. He's got an OPS of 776. That'd be the highest on your team. Gavin Sheets.
Yeah, and you know what though? Here's what I would submit. Gavin Sheets is surrounded in San Diego by a pretty good lineup. He does not have to be relied upon for anything in particular. But in this lineup, he would be a guy that has a lot of pressure to try and hit the ball out of the ballpark and everything. And out there, he can just go back and play like he was doing in Birmingham. I think a lot of sometimes what happens with these guys, and what I'm worried about with these prospects coming up, is when you have to be the man, when you're called upon to do something in particular, and you're just not there playing baseball, okay? Because you're the savior, you're the next guy, you're the guy that's going to lead this team, you're an important piece of the future. I don't know if mentally they can handle it. And I know it's up to Will Venable and his staff to try and help that, but coaching can only take you so far. And we talked about that with Miguel Vargas and his turnaround. And, honestly, it's something that I wonder about with Colson Montgomery, because, how much pressure was put on him, and he hasn't even made it to the major leagues yet. And you start to wonder, even something in a smaller sample size. I know Tim Oka was going to be a high strikeout, hit it out of the ballpark kind of guy, but you do wonder if he's come up here and immediately been like, they want to see dingers. They want to see me, put the ball out of the ballpark.
Music means the Sox nerd Dave Marin is on the line to give us some tidbits and trivia nuggets, just like he does at the rate each and every home game for the White Sox. And he joins us here on Sox in the Basement, brought to you by the Village of Lamont. Want to experience a downtown with real history, great eats and drinks, and green spaces filled with adventure? Visit the Village of Lamont. Shop, dine, drink, explore, see everything they have going on. It's going to be a full summer, and check out the Lamont Unlocked podcast with yours truly at lamontdowntown.com. Nerd, what do you got for me?
Chris, how about a little insight into how I find some of the material I post on the scoreboard during games? I have been researching, writing, and displaying stats on the White Sox scoreboard since 1984, with the exception of the 1988 and 1989 seasons when I started my career at the Kenosha News. The position has evolved parallel to the stat explosion in MLB. I started posting really basic stuff on the players, which is still valuable, but I am now incorporating more in-depth stats such as home run distances, launch angles, exit velocities, and pitch speed. As the stat industry has become more automated, I have evolved too, and this is where my passion within the passion comes in. In order to stay relevant and not be redundant with the automated stats, I started coming up with more in-depth material on players in the franchise while also using the modern day stuff. What I did Monday is a good example of this. During the game, I was researching Sox players born in Seattle because the Sox are playing the Mariners, and I thought it would make an interesting note. Among those players was current pitcher Cam Boozer. He pitched that night. I checked my list and discovered he was the first Sox Seattle native to pitch against Seattle since Dave Hamilton in 1977. I typed it up, and as Hawk Harrelson used to say, put it on the board. Specific plays are also a trigger. For example, catcher Matt Thaiss has 2 pickoffs at third base so far this season. I had to find out when the last time the Sox catcher had multiple pickoffs at third base in a season. It took a few days scouring season stats and play-by-plays all the way back to 1912 because stats like this aren't part of the baseballreference.com sortable database, which is my favorite resource. I found it and discovered that Thaiss is the first Sox catcher since Ed Herman in 1972 to have more than 1 pickoff in a season at third base. By the way, the last Sox backstop with more than 2 pickoffs at third was Sherm Lawler in 1955. Other nuggets I learned during the Seattle series are Edgar Caro is one of just 5 Sox catchers and the first since Adrian Nieto in 2014 to have more than one 3-hit game in his first 23 MLB contests. New White Sox pitcher Adrian Hauser is a member of the Cherokee Nation and grew up speaking some Cherokee in school. The late George Wendt, a Beverly native, was at the final game at Comiskey Park. I knew that, but what I didn't remember was that legendary actress Maureen O'Hara, who starred in the original Miracle on 34th Street, was there too. Tuesday was the Sox' 265th 1-0 win. Chase Meidroth has been an absolute beast leading off games. The rookie is slashing .579, .600, and .895 with a homer in 20 game-starting appearances heading into the weekend. Before I get to my zinger, I remind you that gems like these and long-form pieces are on my blog, which you can link to at soxinthebasement.com. My zinger, in honor of the 20th anniversary of the World Champions, I'm going to zing frequently about that team, throwing out some gems you may not know about the 2005 Sox. One of the most incredible stats about the 05 champs was that they held the lead in 137 of 162 regular season games, including a major league record 37 straight games to begin the season. That's it, Chris. Probably more than you wanted to know about pickoffs at third, Maureen O'Hara, the Cherokee Nation, and how the Sox nerd makes his sausage.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.